and welcome to When Burnout Becomes Reality podcast, a podcast born out of my own personal experience of burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma as a caregiving professional. This podcast showcases both lived experience guests and also guests who are in the field of burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma, including myself from Burnout Psychology Support. It's all about sharing the wisdom that we have, whether it's the lived experience guests or it's the expert guests, sharing our wisdom so that you, the listener, can gain that wealth so you can either help yourself or be able to help others who are going through this. Just a word of caution as well. Everything that is shared in these episodes are for educational purposes only. They are certainly not a replacement for evidence-based therapy support. It's something that myself, I still engage with it, but certainly when I was in the thick of my burnout, engaged with, and a lot of my other guests. So I really encourage you to do so. So thank you so much for listening. And don't forget, if you like an episode, hit like. I love hearing from you, so comment away or definitely subscribe or follow so you stay up to date with episode releases. But thank you so much for being here and take care of you. Bye for now. Okay, so this is a bit of an impromptu chat with myself. This reminds me back when I was burnt out, I journaled, and for a long time my journaling was contained to writing on things that were going on for me in my head, in my heart, in my body, in my life, but all with the aim of processing and really connecting back into myself to help heal and grow, at that time heal. And then it morphed into, I think it next morphed into this. I would rather talk into a camera or into audio record rather than write. I just got sick of writing. And then more recently, or for a while, it's been art, drawing, as a way to feel into, connect, and process through my body what I'm going through mentally, physically, or emotionally. But I felt compelled today to record and maybe share. So if you're watching this, I've decided to share. And it's a spur of the moment thing. So I'm in my exercise gear. My hair's not done. I'm using Zoom's touch up appearance thing, just FYI. Because I can't be bothered trying to make myself look presentable. This is me. And you can hear the noises in the background. So nothing about this is professional, but that's me. Anyway, come to what I wanted to process for myself today, but share with you as well, if I decide to share this, is that I am being tested for, and I don't know if I'm going to be saying this right, but I'm being tested for ADHD and autism soon. I set that up a few months ago because I know it can be hard to get in to see people who are trained and experienced. So the person I connected with, she's down in Melbourne, I'm up here in Brisbane, but we're doing it all online, and it's coming up in a couple of weeks, which I am excited, but also just feel a sense of dread. Dread's not the right word, but I just feel a little bit hollow or unsure, or just a little bit in Neverland with it, if that makes sense. It's not really, there are some thinking processes that I'll share. But first of all, I just kind of, I can be a bit of a storyteller, so I just kind of want to share where it all came from. I would never have assumed myself or come to any conclusion. Well, I don't think I would have, that I could possibly be ADHD or autistic. I am 45 now, and growing up, it wasn't really in my environment, at least, but I think it was the times as well. Many people who are openly autistic or ADHD, and if they were, they tended to be male on both. And what we've come to know might be more of the extremities or the extremes in terms of impact on functioning that was seen or talked about. And even as in my training as a psychologist, which was very minimal on neurodivergency, which I don't even think they called it that, but the ADHD and at the time Asperger's and autism, I didn't really learn enough about them. And what we did learn, I believe, is now debunked, or we know a lot more since my training, and I haven't worked in it since. Anyway, fast forward. So there's no, I suppose, environmental opportunities for me to even question. And there was no outwardly concerning behaviors that would alert any of my caregivers, my parents, to be concerned. I was studious. I liked to learn. I actually, yeah, I enjoyed learning. I enjoyed the learning process of school. Socially was another issue, but I got by enough. I was a shy, and I do this, I was a shy kid. I remember spending a lot of time in the library, particularly in year 7, I think, but also 6. This was when I was starting to like boys, and that just brought up a whole other thing. And so I would shut myself in the library, which I've now come to realize was a survival, was well, not a survival, but actually what I needed. The library was very silent, very controlled environment. The librarian was really beautiful and warm and caring and kind, and she ran a tight ship there. So it was, and you could just immerse yourself in a book. And I don't think I can't even remember what I read. I think it was just mostly the environment. Anyway, socially wasn't always fun for me, but I always seemed to make friends, but I never had really close friends. And I was very internalized as well. I was particularly sensitive to other people's judgments or experience with me. Anyway, but on the outside, I was getting good marks. I was doing my work. I didn't, behave badly in class. I was always studious. I didn't even want to do the wrong thing out of fear of what the repercussions would be. I was raised in a generation where and I'm not quite sure about the generation since, but the repercussions were pretty harsh. Not that I'm advocating for them. But anyway, I maybe digress. I'm not sure, which might be a neurodivergent thing. I don't know. But that's a little bit. So, high school was a bit of a social struggle, but there's a little bit more freedom to be or to find yourself there. But again, I still had a lot of those same things, but I again didn't struggle at school, and was able to, yeah, nothing sort of was flagged. I think I only failed one subject once, and got some extra tutoring help, and everything was fine. I was also heavily involved in sports, which I think might have been a saving grace. There was community, there was connection, there was energy. I know movement is something really useful to me. But again, I looked normal, here's a sporty kid, academic, high achiever, uh, good girl, both at home and at school. So yeah, I even think now, thinking about all that, you know, well, I don't have ADHD or autism. I don't fit the box. However, fast forward. um, so I wrote my book, Nothing Left to Give, which is up there somewhere in my bookshelf, which was my journal entries of my first year of burnout and being completely, excuse my French, but fucked. And my life just turned upside down, particularly my work life, but that was my life back then. That was my identity, my value, my worth, my contribution to the world. It was everything. And, just one day I wasn't able to do it anymore and left, which then had its own complications. So anyway, in this book, I decided to publish my journal entries. I felt like it might help somebody else to hear my story. It also helped me towards a lifelong, not a lifelong, but I like to write. I like to share. I like to tell a story. I like, even though it's hard, vulnerability. And I like to help. So anyway, I put this book out there, but throughout the process, because I didn't want to just put a book out there and not have it done well. So I engaged with an editor, the lovely Edwina Shaw, here in Brisbane. And it was in her edits that she, a few times, was like, do you think you're autistic? I think she wrote, or I don't think she ever wrote ADHD, but do you think this might be autism? And I'm like, I never actually followed that up with her. I just kind of read it, poo-pooed the idea, just glossed over it. Obviously didn't, well, at the time I didn't do anything about it. I just read it and went, no, because then I still had the knowledge base, or which was very much the stereotypical or the outdated beliefs around what ADHD and autism looks like, particularly in women and girls. And so I was like, yeah, nah, like, no, it's social anxiety, it's depression, it's all the things that I've, cycled through my whole life. And I was like, yeah, I just didn't, I can still see that red pen, visually can see the red pen. Do you think you're autistic? I should go back and look at that and snapshot that. But anyway, fast forward a little bit further, and I was interviewing a lovely lady, and her name escapes me at the moment, but a mental health nurse coach who specializing in working with people who are highly sensitive. And she shared with me about this concept of the highly sensitive person, which I know there's contention, just for anyone who's aware of HSP, and that being really potentially that person might be autistic, and that their HSP in itself isn't a diagnosis. But look, for me, putting that aside, so scientific me putting that aside, clinically trained psychologist putting that aside, just as a person, when this beautiful lady came into my life, and I can't even remember how that all happened, but that's right, she wanted to interview me for her podcast, which was all around the sensitive person. And because she saw through my, I think, journal articles, which at the time I was just publishing as blogs, not as the book yet, she could see that I was possibly quite a highly sensitive person. So anyway, she interviewed me for a blog, for her podcast about my burnout and my experience there. And I looked into this HSP more, and it really resonated that I tend to feel the energy of others. I think that's what makes me, or is a strength of mine, both personally and professionally, that it's more of a felt sense that I can pick up other people's experiences, rather than a read sense, like their nonverbals or stuff, because I feel like I suck at that. But I thought I didn't suck at that, because this felt sense. Like I can pick up that energy. I also noticed that I have sensitivity to certain sensory experiences in the environment, noise particularly, but particular noises. And I've become more attuned with what I've come to learn, my spiky profile, what raises, so I become hyper with, and what sensory sort of brings me down into the hypo. Hopefully I've got that right. I'm still just learning. But like, yeah, I have sensitivity around my environment that can lead me to become quite overwhelmed, or could, settle me as well. So anyway, so through this lovely lady, HSP kind of, came across. Then fast forward a bit more, and as I ventured back into practicing, but specializing in working with people with burnout, I was starting to notice that a lot of people that are burnt out are either neurodivergent or suspect they are, or that's a conversation I've raised with them, and they've gone and got tested and found that they are. It's not that neurotypical people don't burn out too, but it's just that there's certainly more risk for neurodivergent people, which I won't get into, but I've got some episodes on the podcast, When Burnout Becomes Reality. Just going to go through a name change soon, but it will talk to that change. So to that, and I've lost my train of thought to that anyway. But yeah, getting into practice, being exposed to these to people with neurodivergency, I went, oh, well, that's an area of deficit for me. I don't really understand it. And if I'm going to stay in the burnout field, let's get to know ND. Like, let's really get updated. So I started exposing myself to material on it, particularly the Neurodivergent Women podcast, lots of other resources. And as I was tuning in, listening and learning and growing, I was like, that's me, or that's me, or I do that, or that makes sense. And I was like, am I? And I was like, nah, but it was just starting to really sink in. And then also people in my family, the next generation, was starting to be diagnosed with this or questioning this. And I was like, okay. And fast forward a little bit more, I went back to the psychologist I saw when I was really burnt out. I did some intensive therapy for 14 sessions or so in that first year of being recovering and healing from it. That and that never got brought up, but I thought, well, she knows me quite intensely in that period, but also my history, because things come up. It's all linked. And so I went back to her and I had a chat with her and just said, hey, I'm questioning this. What's your thoughts on it? And she's like, yeah, I have thought that you might, or it'd be worth testing for ADHD. And I was a bit thrown, because I was thinking autism, because, back to Edwina, she had suggested autism with the whole HSP thing in connection with autism. And what I was starting to learn, I really resonated with some of the autistic things, but I was starting to also notice ADHD, but I was still kind of poo-pooing that idea. I didn't really quite connect with that. I'm not quite sure why, but as I got chatting with Carla, my psychologist, she was like, yeah, no, I think it's worth getting tested on both. And I went, okay. And she had a bit more chat, because she knows a bit more about my family and things like that, and just some connections there, that she was like, look, I mean, up to me what I do, of course, but she really encouraged the investigation. So that's what leads me to here. And I've shared this with my partner, my husband, Ryan, my very trusted other, and I've shared it with a couple close friends who are safe others for me to share this stuff with, and not feel burdened or judged or put down or whatever, or dismissed, any negative reactions. And things have come up, and particularly with my partner, who's quite a solution focused person, like what all this what are you hoping this will bring? Which are good questions, or what makes you think that you are and that was a particularly hard question to answer, because I felt like I've come to learn through our discussions that I felt like I needed to prove. And he's like, no, I don't need you to prove this. I'm just curious what process has brought you to there. So pretty much I've shared what I've shared with you with that, and that helped him understand. But the answer to that question, yeah, what do I hope that will come of this? Because he's like, well, what would be the point of investing in this? And I still question that. Like, am I looking for a label? Am I looking for an excuse? Am I looking for a reason for being the way I am? Am I looking for acceptance? Am I looking for belonging? Am I looking for what? And I don't think I have the answers to that. And I feel now, just talking about, maybe I don't need to have the answers to that question. Like, why am I doing this? What am I hoping that outcome is? I just know that this is my next step, that this seems right to do. I don't know. I think I kind of know why. Like, I'm on a path of growth and understanding and really knowing myself. And I feel like that's part of the pathway. I feel like this is aligned with that direction and that value, that if I am autistic or ADHD, that this process assessment will help me to further understand that profile of me, how I work, how my brain functions, how, for me, it's about knowing myself. And I feel that sometimes assessment can help us with that. And so, yeah, that's a big part of it. And I suppose that's why it feels right for me. So, yeah, I just wanted to unpack that part today, because it just sits in my brain every now and again, nearing to the state of assessment. I'm like, why am I doing this? It's a lot of money. It's not cheap. There's no rebates, or not on Medicare. And my health insurance is the very basics. So, but, it's a lot of money, but money I've chosen to invest in my health with. Um, I think the other thing is, and my husband said this too, and I've talked about this with girlfriends who, funny enough, both of them, who they've both been through their own processes. And I think one has been formally diagnosed, but the other one suspects, but it hasn't been formally. And I would agree, basically agree that they both are somewhere on that neurodivergent spectrum, ADHD, autism stuff. And anyway, like, what if I'm not? And that's something my husband's brought up. Like, what if you're not? And that one I think is harder to sit with. Like, what if I go through this whole process and I'm not neurodivergent? I think that might be what's leaving a hollow. Yeah, because maybe for some reason I'm thinking, well, I don't know myself, or what I'm thinking or learning about myself maybe might not be true. I think it brings in doubts about my ability to know myself, because I've been on this path of really connecting and knowing myself for some time now, since I burnt out. So that's 4 years ago, coming up to 4 years. Because my burnout to me was being completely disconnected from myself, and therefore my life and my direction. And I feel like the last 4 years have been an unmasking of self and who I thought I needed to be and who I truly am. And I'm unlearning a lot of behaviors and a lot of mental and physical patterns, a lot of relational patterns. And yeah, it's just like, oh, am I masking again? I don't know. Like, it's like, but what I'm trying to do what just jumped into me there is like, rather than seeing this as a dichotomous kind of thing, if I'm using that word right, like you're either neurodivergent or you're not. And what that means about my ability to know myself is that, well, this is on that pathway to connecting to myself and really understanding myself, that on this pathway, I'm getting this assessment to see if that's part of who I am. And I say with neurodivergency is part of who I am because it's a neurological condition from my understanding. It's a way that our minds and nervous systems are wired. It's not something that we can change per se, but it is something that we can work with, and there are ways to work with it. Sometimes it might be, and with ADHD, medication to work with it, and other behavioral things that we can do, or environmental changes to support our neurodivergency. So I see that as part of who I am, part of my makeup. It's not all that I am, but that it is part of me, just like, I don't know, my hair. It's just part of who my makeup. So I don't know where I was going with that. I've lost my train of thought. But yeah, this is just, okay, this is a small part in my direction of really being me and being authentically me and knowing who that is by reconnecting back to my whole self and really noticing her in relation to her experiences to know what works and what doesn't. So yeah, that, I feel like, for me anyway, sharing this with you, if I have published this in some way, is where I'm at. And I suppose, just like my book, just like everything I do now in work and in life as well, is that I share my own personal experience, because I know I'm not alone with this. I know I've had clients who question this even after being diagnosed, question it. I'm sharing my questioning process to you to normalize and validate if you're sitting there doing the same. And I invite you to reflect in whatever way works for you. It might be like me sitting here talking to a laptop, recording it on Zoom, or it might be you writing about it, drawing about it, talking to a friend, or all of the above. Whatever your processes are, it is certainly worth getting out of our heads, and just that loop that can happen all the time and get nowhere, and actually actively relating this story to ourselves or to others in some way, because it's often relationally that we can make sense of our world and what we're experiencing. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. Please let me know if you're in the same boat, if you want to, or share what this listening to this has meant to you. I'd love to hear from you. But take care of you. Bye for now. Me again. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of my Burnout Becomes Reality podcast. I do hope that you have gained some insight, wisdom, or taking away something from this episode that is helpful for you with wherever you're at in your burnout journey, or helping others with. Please also reach out. I'd love to hear from the listeners, the viewers, to find out what you're finding helpful, maybe what you still would like to know. So please don't hesitate to follow, subscribe, comment, review, like, shoot me an email. I have my details in the show notes. And if you are in need of services around burnout and you are an Australian citizen, I, in my business, Burnout Psychology Support, do offer group and individual services, telehealth, as well as in-person in Brisbane. So again, check out the show notes. I have my contact details, but the best thing to do is jump on my website at www.burnoutspsychologysupport.com. And just a reminder, of course, to reach out for personalized help. This podcast, whilst we strive to deliver information that can be supportive and educational for you, it is not tailored to meet your personal needs, and burnout is very individualized in terms of what gets us into burnout and what helps support us in getting out. So please do seek professional support. And I think that is it for me to share with you. Thank you once again, and take care of you. Bye for now.